Could a monster earthquake sink a portion of Northern California? A new study addresses that very question and whether we could see impacts here at home.
Yeah, well, when you see that study, it can look pretty alarming. So I spoke with Dr. Lucy Jones, and she said this possibility has actually been known for a few decades.
The red alert issued by the United States Geological Survey was not a routine notice, nor was it one of those warnings that quietly passed through the news cycle with minimal disruption. It was something that jolted the public consciousness because it addressed a discovery beneath California's coastal fault zones that few expected and even fewer were prepared to process. The words red alert themselves carried an urgency that immediately stirred a storm of speculation, and as the details emerged, it became clear why the announcement carried such weight. Deep beneath the surface of one of the most seismically active regions in the world, USGS scientists had detected structural anomalies and geophysical signatures that were both unprecedented and alarming. These were not simply minor shifts in tectonic plates or background tremors that Californians had learned to live with. What had been found beneath the coastal fault lines appeared to reframe the way scientists understood the very architecture of the land, and it was the sheer magnitude of this revelation that shocked the world. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. California has always been a place where geology demands attention. The San Andreas Fault, the Hayward Fault, and countless smaller fracture lines carved the landscape into a mosaic of unstable boundaries. Generations have grown up under the shadow of the big one. The hypothetical massive earthquake that seismologists predict will one day rupture with devastating force. But the discovery that led to the red alert wasn't merely about the potential for earthquakes. It was about what lay hidden beneath the coastal zones, structures that had gone unnoticed despite decades of scientific scrutiny. Using advanced seismic imaging, satellite interferometry, and deep earth acoustic probing, researchers uncovered evidence of vast subsurface chambers filled with volatile compounds, immense stretches of ultra-pressurized rock, and fault line geometries that suggested interconnectivity at a scale no one had ever considered. Instead of isolated systems grinding against one another, the coastal faults appeared to be part of a far larger, unified structure with the capacity to trigger a cascade of geophysical events. The implications of this were staggering. It suggested that California's seismic systems were not merely local phenomena, but potentially part of a mega network capable of transmitting stress across immense distances. In practical terms, this meant that an earthquake along one section of the coast could act like a trigger for a series of ruptures extending hundreds of miles. The analogy scientists began to use was that of a spider's web under tension. Touch one part, and the vibration reverberates throughout the entire network. The red alert was not simply about the discovery itself, but about the recognition that humanity might be standing on the edge of a geologic system primed to unleash energy on a scale previously unimaginable. One of the most unsettling findings from the USGS team was the presence of what appeared to be massive stores of superheated fluids locked within subterranean pockets. These fluids, likely a mixture of water, gas, and mineral-rich solutions, were trapped under extreme pressures deep within the fault zones. Their presence alone was not surprising. Fluids often accumulate within fault structures, but the sheer volume and interconnectedness of these reservoirs were beyond anything documented before. Fluids at such pressure act as lubricants, reducing friction between fault blocks and making sudden slip events more likely. If destabilized, these reservoirs could amplify seismic ruptures, turning a major quake into something truly catastrophic. The red alert was, in part, a warning that the system had reached a precarious balance where even small disturbances might unlock forces capable of reshaping entire regions. Another element that shocked scientists and policymakers alike was the discovery of hidden crystalline formations beneath the coastal zones. Advanced imaging revealed lattices of dense mineral deposits arranged in patterns that suggested long-term stress accumulation. These crystalline structures were essentially acting like springs, storing mechanical energy across centuries. What startled researchers most was that these formations were distributed in ways that could synchronize with known fault lines, meaning that if one segment were to rupture, the energy release could resonate through the crystal network, magnifying the destructive power of the event. It was as though the Earth had engineered a natural amplifier for seismic energy, lying dormant until the right conditions aligned. The the world reacted with a mixture of disbelief and dread. For decades, California had been viewed as the testing ground for seismic preparedness, a place where building codes, early warning systems, and public drills were part of daily life. Yet this discovery suggested that even the most advanced safeguards might be inadequate in the face of what was possible. International scientists rushed to collaborate, analyzing data and offering interpretations, but the underlying conclusion remained consistent. The coastal faults were not merely zones of localized danger, but the potential linchpins of global seismic behavior. If these interconnected systems were to rupture in sequence, the reverberations would not be confined to California alone. They could influence tectonic activity across the Pacific Rim, from Alaska down to South America, and even as far as Asia. At the center of this revelation was the unsettling question of time. USGS scientists emphasized that while the structures beneath the coast were primed for release, they could not pinpoint when such an event might occur. It could be decades, centuries, or tomorrow. The unpredictability was part of what made the red alert so urgent. The warning was not meant to incite panic, but to prepare minds for the reality that humanity had stumbled upon a geophysical truth too vast to ignore. The discovery beneath California's coastal fault zones was not just about earthquakes. It was about the hidden architecture of the planet, the forces that shape continents, and the recognition that the Earth itself is more dynamic and unpredictable than previously understood. Global implications began to emerge quickly as scientists connected the findings with seismic patterns observed elsewhere. The Pacific Ring of Fire, that massive horseshoe-shaped zone of seismic and volcanic activity, suddenly looked different in light of the California discovery. If the coastal faults were indeed part of a larger interlinked system, then it suggested a level of planetary coherence that could explain why seismic events sometimes appeared to cluster in ways that had previously defied explanation. The Earth, it seemed, might operate more like a living organism than a collection of independent parts, with stresses and pressures communicated across vast distances in ways only now beginning to be mapped. For California itself, the discovery was both terrifying and oddly clarifying. The state's geological history has always been dramatic, from mountain ranges thrust skyward by tectonic collisions to coastlines reshaped by ancient quakes. But this revelation reframed that history as part of a broader, more interconnected saga. The very land that supports millions of people was not simply resting on shifting plates. It was perched above a network of volatile systems working in concert. To live in California was to inhabit a threshold between stability and upheaval, a reminder that human civilization is ultimately at the mercy of geologic forces beyond control. The public's imagination ran wild as the details were released. Artists rendered visions of titanic fractures racing along the coastline, while writers spoke of an Earth that seemed to breathe beneath the feet of its inhabitants. The scientific precision of the USGS findings was quickly blended with cultural interpretations, but the core fact remained immutable. Something beneath the coastal fault zones had been uncovered that defied expectations and forced a rethinking of geologic risk. The shock was not only in the discovery itself, but in the confrontation with the scale of what lay hidden beneath the surface, waiting in silence until the moment of release. The red alert also raised profound philosophical questions. If the Earth's systems were this interconnected, then human concepts of boundaries, state lines, national borders, and even continental divisions seemed almost trivial in comparison. Nature was operating on a scale that made human divisions seem like temporary illusions. The discovery forced people to reckon with their place on the planet, not as masters of their environment, but as passengers aboard a living, shifting world. It was a humbling realization, one that united scientists, citizens, and leaders in a shared recognition of vulnerability. As days turned to weeks, the initial shock gave way to a deeper contemplation of what it meant to live in an age where hidden truths of the planet were being revealed with such clarity. The technology that had uncovered the subsurface structures, satellite systems, deep Earth imaging, supercomputers capable of modeling tectonic stress, represented humanity's triumph of intellect and persistence. And yet, the knowledge gained did not diminish the threat, but heightened it. To know the magnitude of the danger was to feel its weight more profoundly. The red alert was both a warning and a testament, A reminder that even in an age of extraordinary scientific progress, the Earth still holds mysteries capable of stunning and unsettling the entire world. This event, though rooted in the scientific specifics of California's coastal geology, carried with it a resonance that reached far beyond the state's borders. It was a story about the planet itself, about the forces that shape it, and the people who inhabit it. It was about the recognition that humanity's story is inextricably bound to the shifting, restless Earth, and that beneath the most familiar landscapes lie truths that can still shock, even in an age where we believe we have mapped and measured nearly everything. The USGS Red Alert was more than a scientific announcement. It was a revelation that reminded the world how fragile the ground beneath our feet truly is. The tremors of discovery that followed the Red Alert were not confined to California. While the USGS announcement was rooted in seismic science, its implications cascaded outward into nearly every field that touches human life. Across the globe, conversations ignited about infrastructure, energy systems, climate stability, and even the nature of human settlement itself. The Red Alert acted like a spark dropped into dry grass. The realization that beneath the coastal fault zones lay structures vast enough to alter global understanding of geology pushed people into considering realities they had long managed to ignore. One of the most striking elements to emerge from subsequent discussion was the role of technology in uncovering what had been hidden for so long. The fault systems of California had been studied exhaustively for over a century, yet it was only with the combination of orbital satellites, ground-based acoustic mapping, and machine learning analysis that scientists were able to peel back the crust and glimpse the intricate architecture below. Satellite interferometry revealed minute shifts in the surface elevation, changes so subtle they could never be detected by the human eye. Yet when stitched together into time-lapse models, they told a story of subterranean pressure building in coordinated patterns. Meanwhile, acoustic probing systems bounced sound waves deep into the crust and returned signals that hinted at hollow chambers, fluid reservoirs, and crystal networks concealed far beneath. Artificial intelligence trained on vast datasets from global seismic records then connected the dots, identifying correlations that suggested California's coastal faults were less like isolated scars and more like veins in a single circulatory system. The technological triumph of this discovery brought as much awe as dread. On one hand, it proved the immense capability of modern science to perceive the imperceptible. On the other hand, it forced the world to realize that even with this insight, there was no way to stop or neutralize the forces at play. This paradox was one of the most unsettling aspects of the Red Alert. Humanity had gained unprecedented vision, but that vision offered no control. The discovery was akin to gazing into the heart of a storm system and realizing that prediction alone could not alter its path. As these findings were disseminated, policymakers were thrust into an unenviable position. Coastal California is not just a geological zone, it is an economic and cultural powerhouse. Silicon Valley, Hollywood, the busy ports of Los Angeles and San Francisco all rest atop or near these fault systems. The recognition that these regions might be connected to deeper, more volatile networks unsettled more than just scientists. Governments, corporations, and financial institutions began to model scenarios in which a single rupture could ripple through not only the ground, but also through the global economy. The interconnectedness of the modern world mirrored the interconnectedness of the faults themselves. If a rupture could cascade geologically, then its consequences could cascade socially, politically, and economically as well. The implications extended into infrastructure planning. Engineers began to revisit assumptions that underpinned California's seismic safety codes. For decades, the guiding principle had been localized preparedness. Structures were designed to withstand the most likely events projected for their immediate region. But the discovery beneath the coastal zones suggested that localized thinking was inadequate. If faults were capable of triggering one another in chain reactions, then designs needed to account for scenarios where multiple ruptures occurred across hundreds of miles simultaneously. This was not a matter of simply reinforcing buildings or bridges. It meant re-evaluating the very philosophy of how human settlements interface with dynamic geology. Energy systems were another realm thrown into the spotlight. California's coastal regions are home to nuclear power plants, oil refineries, and an expanding network of renewable energy installations. The realization that superheated fluids and volatile chambers lay hidden beneath these fault lines raised questions about the safety of situating such critical infrastructure in zones of potential catastrophic destabilization. A rupture that intersected with subterranean fluid reservoirs could not only amplify seismic force, but also disrupt groundwater systems, destabilize foundations, and even release hazardous gases. The shock here was in recognizing how deeply human systems had embedded themselves into a landscape whose full nature had not been understood. Beyond the practical, the discovery sparked profound cultural and psychological reactions. California has long held a mythic place in the human imagination, a land of opportunity, innovation, and beauty, where mountains rise against the Pacific and dreams are pursued with relentless energy. Yet now that myth was tempered by the knowledge that beneath this landscape lay structures capable of unleashing destruction at scales far beyond the expected. Artists began to grapple with new metaphors, portraying California not just as a place of promise, but as a threshold where humanity's ambitions confront the raw forces of the earth. Writers, filmmakers, and musicians began exploring themes of fragility, interconnectedness, and the uneasy relationship between civilization and geology. International reactions were equally intense. Nations along the Pacific Rim, many of which sit on their own active fault lines, looked at California's discovery with both alarm and solidarity. Japan, Chile, Indonesia, and New Zealand all have histories of seismic catastrophe, and scientists in those countries began collaborating with USGS teams to explore whether similar hidden structures might lie beneath their own coastal zones. The Red Alert had effectively globalized the conversation about seismic risk. It was no longer a matter of localized danger, but of planetary-scale processes that might operate across continents and oceans. This reframing galvanized new international research partnerships as nations realized that the shocks in one region could illuminate vulnerabilities in another. Philosophically, the discovery carried unsettling lessons about human hubris. For centuries, civilizations had built monuments, cities, and entire cultures atop landscapes without fully grasping the forces beneath them. The Red Alert was a reminder that human history is but a thin veneer upon an ancient and restless planet. This realization did not diminish human achievements, but it forced a recalibration of perspective. The Earth was not a passive stage upon which history unfolded. It was an active participant, shaping destinies with forces that dwarfed political, economic, and even military power. The discovery also reignited debates about the balance between risk and reward. California's prosperity has always been tied to its geography, fertile valleys, access to the Pacific, and a climate that nurtures agriculture and innovation. Yet the same geology that made this possible also carried immense danger. The hidden structures beneath the coastal fault symbolize this paradox in stark terms. Could a society continue to thrive atop such volatile foundations, or would prudence dictate a gradual shift of population and infrastructure inland? These questions were not answered easily, for they struck at the heart of how humans define home and identity. Moving away from risk zones would not only mean physical relocation, but also cultural displacement. The scientific community, meanwhile, began to speculate on deeper implications for the planet itself. If California's faults were part of an interconnected network, then perhaps other regions of the world were linked in ways not yet understood. This hinted at the possibility of a global tectonic consciousness, where stresses in one region could ripple invisibly to others. The idea resonated with new models of Earth system science that view the planet as a complex, dynamic organism. The discovery beneath California was not just a local revelation, it was a keyhole through which humanity glimpsed the deeper logic of the planet's restless machinery. Environmentalists found new resonance in this revelation as well. For decades, they had warned of the dangers of exploiting landscapes without regard for long-term consequences. The Red Alert underscored their point with dramatic force. It suggested that humanity does not merely alter the surface of the Earth, but lives in symbiosis with forces that extend deep below. This recognition reframed environmental responsibility not just as stewardship of forests, rivers, and air, but as an awareness of the planet's hidden systems as well. The Earth beneath California's coastal faults was no longer simply bedrock. It was a living, dynamic partner in humanity's existence. The emotional impact of the red alert was perhaps its most enduring element. People across the world felt a visceral shock at the realization that the ground could conceal such immense secrets. For many, it was a reminder of mortality, of the limits of control, and of the fragility of even the most advanced civilizations. For others, it sparked awe, a recognition that the planet still held mysteries vast enough to humble the human spirit. This duality, fear and wonder, defined the collective response. It was not unlike gazing into the cosmos, a confrontation with forces that transcend comprehension yet invite exploration. In the months following the alert, institutions of learning rushed to incorporate the discovery into their curricula. Geology students studied the imaging techniques that revealed the hidden chambers. Philosophers debated the implications of interconnected fault networks for human self-understanding. Economists modeled potential global disruptions in the event of a cascading rupture. In this sense, the discovery became more than a warning. It became a catalyst for knowledge, driving new lines of inquiry across disciplines. The shock of what was found beneath California became fuel for intellectual exploration worldwide. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on USGS red alert beneath California's coastal fault zones? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.